us light. By your power, Lord, give us might. Down through the ages, all saints and sages, shine with your light divine. Throughout the land you reach out your hand, that none should be left behind. May we learn how to give, how to love, oh Lord, how to live without fear.
So dear Swamis and dear devotees, tonight I am going to conclude the topic that I initiated on last Tuesday. The topic was discipleship. Therefore, the topic tonight is called More About Discipleship. So, if you remember, I was talking about the necessity of focusing on how to be a good disciple instead of discussing on the ideal guru or how to find a guru in life. I also mentioned that there does exist a mysterious law by virtue of which whenever a person is prepared as a disciple, a guru, according to the ability of that disciple or the preparedness of the disciple, would arrive. This we have found from the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and from his life story also. So in that last class I was talking about that these disciples are of many different standards. There are disciples and there are disciples. As we find in Kathopanishad, it talks about three types of disciples: the superior kind of disciple, the mediocre kind of disciple, and the inferior kind of disciple. Depending upon how those disciples they respond to their guru. That is in the Kathopanishad. And the reason why these kind of differences are there among the disciples, I mentioned that because everything in this creation is a combination of these three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. And because this admixture of three gunas, the inner quality of the person as a disciple would manifest in many different ways, depending upon how much percentage of sattva and rajas and tamas is existing in the person and which of these three qualities is prevailing in the personality. If the sattva quality will prevail over rajas and tamas, then the person would appear very spiritually oriented, bright, sharp, focused, intelligent, capable of understanding whatever is being said to him, and also is capable of staying put on his path of the spiritual discipline. So sattva quality helps the person to progress faster than everyone else, all other disciples. Similarly, if the rajas is prevailing in the personality, then the person create some kind of a conflicting situation in the personality. The Rajasic tendency will help the person to pay more attention to the external attractions. Things of this world, they would appear as more interesting and attractive and worth achieving. And therefore, these are the distractions that would come as an obstruction on the path of spiritual progress. A Rajasic disciple basically might be understanding what is right and what is more beneficial, but still not be able to stay on the path on account of all those distractions. Distractions that will be created within his or her heart, appearing in the form of worldly ambitions and worldly desires. Tamasic tendencies would create a kind of darkness, ignorance, misunderstanding, and laziness in the personality. Right becomes wrong, wrong becomes right. The ideal will not be clearly understood. It is not like in the Rajasic. Both Rajasic and Tamasic have got problem, because of which they won't be able to progress as quickly and fast as a Sattvic disciple would be able to. But their situations are different. A Rajasic personality might have a better understanding about the spiritual goal and purpose of human birth, and in spite of all that, may not be doing enough to progress in the spiritual life and spend much of his or her time and energy in pursuit of worldly goals and achievement. This will be the problem in a Rajasic life. And a Tamasic life is a whole lot of a different story. The clarity will be missing. And whatever will be understood cannot be achieved because of a lethargy inborn. And there are many other tidbits are there, I am not going there. But the point is that these three qualities are so very important in a person's life that unless and until we are able to pay attention to how we change the balance and bring more sattvic quality within ourselves, reducing Rajasic and Tamasic tendencies, unless and until we are able to do something in that area, it is really, really difficult to progress in spiritual life. If sattvic quality can be achieved and a person grows very sattvic, then so much will be achieved within so little a time and difficulty. A purely sattvic personality so quickly can understand the ultimate goal of life and the way to achieve that. And whatever comes in the form of instructions or advice or guidance from the teacher so quickly is understood and absorbed, and with full enthusiasm and zeal can be practiced. This we found in that example of Swami Vivekananda, which was also mentioned here the other day on a half-day retreat program, that very famous episode of Swami Vivekananda. At that time he was a college-going student, Narendranath. and he, along with many other of the admirers and followers and disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, was seated in his room, and Sri Ramakrishna, while mentioning the most important teachings of Vaishnava religion, Name Ruchi Jivedaya Vaishnav Sevan, taste in the name, chanting of the holy name of Lord, having compassion for the creatures, and service to the devotees of God. And then Sri Ramakrishna enters into Samadhi, a Bhav Samadhi, and then returns back from there, uttering these words that how could you have compassion on other creatures? You yourself, such a very insignificant creature, you are having compassion on other creature? No, it is just not possible. You can only worship every other form of life as the Lord manifested Himself in that form. This is the sum and substance of what he said. And everybody in the room, they listened to that. But it was only Narendranath who immediately absorbed the message. And later on he explained it to his other brother disciples there, who had no clue about all the detailed insight of that teachings that were given. Now, how that happened? That one person could immediately catch the message, and others, and they were not very ignorant or absolutely worldly minded people altogether, everybody were. They were also religiously inclined, and some of them were progressing persons, young men very close to Sri Ramakrishna and prominent disciples later on they became. But out of all of them, only one person, like Swami Vivekananda, he had a very different kind of a insight, the light, it came from those words, that he changed the whole conversation in the field of religion that were going on in India specifically, and interpretation of Vedanta and interpretation of the main scriptures of Vedanta, Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita, etc. He changed the whole thing based on that one teaching. And he called it practical Vedanta. And he not only changed the whole definition and interpretation of the religious traditions and the scriptures that were prevailing at that time among the whole of the followers of Vedas and Vedic religion. He introduced a new monastic order and the motto of that monastic order based on that one principle and one discipline. The monastic order of Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission that Swami Vivekananda introduced, that had a very new motto. It was not there before. It was about a new form of Vedantic monks that will work on realization of self or self-realization for the liberation of the self, that will be as good as serving all creatures for their progress as well, or helping all creature everywhere in the same way, that all would be progressing simultaneously. Helping everyone everywhere is the way to help oneself in the path of self-realization. Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaya cha. For the rest of the world, how we could serve everybody in this spirit, that is the way for our own individual salvation. Or our individual salvation depends on that, or helping others will automatically happen with our individual. They are one and the same thing, equated as equal thing. Atmana mokshartham jagat hitaya cha. For the good of all, for the salvation of one's own self. This is one and the same thing. There is no difference. Before this kind of monastic motto was set, 2500 years back, the Buddhist monastery was started. And in Buddhist monastery, a motto was put there in place, which was Bahujana hitaya, Bahujana sukhaya. For the sake of good of many, for the sake of happiness of many. This was the motto of the Buddhist monastery that was initiated by Buddha. But that was a very different idea. That was a very different idea. That for the sake of helping others so that many could achieve happiness in their life. To make many people happy. That means there are many unhappiness there. There is suffering and sorrow everywhere. How could we alleviate suffering from the life of many? This was the motto. But here it was much, much more spiritually vibrant. It was a very different objective. Of course, in line with the Vedantic objective of spiritual life. So, how this could happen when Swamiji, it happened just by receiving one message of Sri Ramakrishna. What he said, that it is God alone who has appeared in the form of all creature. In all forms of creation, it is God alone who has appeared. So you as an individual person, and more so as a spiritual seeker, go all out to serve God there, everywhere. Wherever you see all creatures, not only people, you just serve there, looking God in that life form. Now this is a much, much superior, higher, fuller spiritual vision that is the central principle of Vedanta. And that is there already existing in the Upanishad and in Bhagavad Gita and everywhere. And a young man, Narendranath, who was in his early 20s at the time, he quickly picked that message from just one simple utterance from Sri Ramakrishna. And how did that happen? Because of the purity of his heart. This Sattvic personality of Narendranath, he was so very pure from inside that it all came in a flash. It all became absolutely clear, crystal clear to him, not to others. This is the point that I was talking, that purification of our personality, and by saying so, we mean that how this combination of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, its percentage of Rajas and Tamas could be reduced gradually and Sattvic quality could be increased gradually. That should be the focus. That is the focus. As and when we are successful in doing so, we become a better student. This Narendranath as a student sitting in front of Sri Ramakrishna, and a message came, or a wonderful spiritual insight came from his mouth, and immediately the central teaching became perfectly clear to a person who was ready for it. So readiness is the point. A student is one who is ready to receive the message of the teacher. If the student is not ready, if the sattvic quality is missing, then the teacher can keep giving talks and discourses and instructions and advices and explain scripture. Nothing is going to enter into that disciple's heart or be understood or absorbed or be implemented in any kind of action. That is what Jesus Christ said, throwing seeds on the rocks. It will be like that. If the land is not ready, then nothing is going to work. So the discipleship wholly depends upon the preparedness. Preparation is all about discipleship. As and when a person becomes ready to receive the higher teachings and messages and the advices and guidances, the teachings start working in that person's life, and the person progresses on the spiritual path very rapidly. This is how it works. So in the Upanishads and in many of the Vedic texts, in short, in the Yoga and Vedanta major books, we hear this thing all the time, that we have been provided basically these three kinds of instruments: the physical body, the mind, and the senses. They have to be made thoroughly prepared to be able to work on the spiritual life or practices. If these are not ready, then we cannot do anything. So physical, we this morning also perhaps we chanted this Appayantu Mamangani, perhaps this, not this morning but other morning. These are the Vedic prayers that Lord, make my body and the senses and the mind and all these things strong and vigorous and energetic and bright. So these are the basic advice to a spiritual seeker, that prepare the field. You need your body strong, each and every limb working nicely, free from all sorts of sickness and illnesses, and they are very much harmoniously working. Prepare your senses that they are sharp and bright, and they are strong, and they are completely within your control. Prepare your mind, which is healthy and strong and absolutely concentrated. Prepare these things. These are your basic instruments. So the entire path of yoga and Vedanta, they talk about the preparation of your instruments that are available to you. Make them ready. And what is about the sattvic quality advancing or improving sattvic propensities or qualities within? How we do that? And as I mentioned, nothing can be done suddenly or all of a sudden coming. It will be happening gradually, step by step, and it is done by following the path of ethical and moral principle. So a spiritual seeker should pay a whole lot of attention to following the path of ethical and moral discipline. It doesn't matter which religious path or which sect or which branch of what one is following, more or less everywhere some basic ethical and moral disciplines are promoted. By following them and remaining very, very truthful to those disciplines, it is following means you are serious about them. It is not like, yeah, mostly I follow them, but whenever it benefits me, I make a little changes here and there. Then that is not following. A person has to be truthful to oneself and not cheat oneself. So following ethical and moral principle, a person can gradually grow sattvic. This is one thing. Another is paying attention to one's physical, mental and all the sense organs, making them strong, healthy, free from all illnesses, concentrated and within one's own control. These are the basic elements that make a person gradually becoming more and more prepared for the spiritual journey. The spiritual journey or spiritual life is something like we hear as the survival of fittest kind of thing. That there is a continuous struggle going on. In the animal kingdom, they have to continuously be careful and fight for their life survival. In the human society also, those who are at a very lowly level of existence, they have to keep struggling very hard for their mere physical survival. But when we rise to the level of a elevated level of social and cultural existence, then our survival is different. Our survival is mostly about struggle within. It doesn't require further explanation that within our own self we are all the time carrying two different kinds of interest or inclinations of mind. One is very pious, kind and generous and truthful, a nobler personality within, and another is angry and jealous and greedy and lusty and different kind of a personality. And these two struggle continuously going on. It is survival of the fittest. Who will survive? Is the holy one will survive or the unholy one? Who is going to survive? Accordingly, a person will survive or grow spiritually. So there is an example given. All of you have seen the picture of Sphinx in Egypt. That Sphinx has got a body of a lion and the head of a man. Before that Egyptian Sphinx, there was a Greek Sphinx. The Greek Sphinx had the head of a woman and the body of a lion. And later on, there were found Roman Sphinx. And Roman Sphinx had both the head of a woman sometime, and sometime it would be a man's head. But the Greek Sphinx was the oldest one, with the head of a woman and the body of a lion. And there is a story attached, associated with that Sphinx. Sphinx in the Greek mythology. That the Sphinx it is called Sphinx of Thebes. That Sphinx, he had thrown a challenge that anyone who could answer his one question, a particular very difficult riddle he will be throwing, of course, could answer it correctly, he will be made the king of Thebans. But if it will be wrong answer, then he will strangulate the man and die. He will die. So many people tried, because there was the offer of becoming the king of the Theban. Nobody survived, many people died. Eventually it was Oedipus who answered the question correctly, and therefore he was made the king of Thebes. And then after making him the king of Thebes, this Sphinx, he jumped into the ocean and died, committed suicide there, or died or disappeared. The Sphinx disappeared. This is the mythology in the Greek mythology about that Sphinx. Here in our heart also this Sphinx is there, sitting there. The Sphinx of half man, half animal, and we have got both the tendencies, and there is a major question asked. Asked, who are you? What are you? This is a very difficult question, because most of the people, they are completely puzzled. Some people answer that I am the man. Some people say I am this animal. And they try to rise in that form, then they get strangulated. And Sphinx remain intact. Another birth, another birth, another birth. The Sphinx comes back, half man, half animal. But the person who could answer that I am that spirit, I am neither this animal nor that man, I am the spirit, then the Sphinx will die. The Sphinx will disappear. The half man, half animal, the continuous inner battle that goes on, an unending battle, that battle comes to an end. So, a discipleship is about finding the correct answer and then marching forward towards that goal of realizing one's divine self, which is not this ordinary human being, not at all the animalistic tendencies and propensities. It is much, much superior and much, much better one. A person who can achieve that kind of focus of mind and clarity of mind becomes the right kind of disciple. So tonight we end our this discussion here.